All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. It's your buddy CJ here. And tonight, we're talking about all things automotive industry, all the things that real car guys are most interested in, automotive enthusiast stuff, cars, real gearhead talk. You guys know this is the home of real gearhead talk. Welcome back to all my subscribers. If you're new, please do give me a like and subscribe. And guys, we've got a treat today. Are you kidding me? Special guest, Jesse Metcalfe. Hollywood actor with a storied 20-year career, known best for Desperate Housewives, for John Tucker Must Die. Are you kidding me? Jesse's worked with Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, Michael Douglas. Jesse, I am so excited. We've got a lot of ground to cover. But first things first, welcome to the podcast.
CJ, so happy to be here, man. I'm a big fan. I love your content.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so very much. You know, Jesse, we've got, as I mentioned, a lot of ground to cover, and we want to get right into it. You know, I think my listeners, we know you from all of your appearances, your roles, memorable roles in television and Hollywood films, but not everybody knows Jesse as car guy. Want to get into your story as an automotive enthusiast. What turned you into a gearhead and kind of level set? And I'm going to put something up on screen to kind of get things rolling here. Who is this guy, Jesse? And how did you come to be a gearhead? Let's hear from you.
Obviously, most people know me from my matinee idol roles. I definitely have been put in the heartthrob sort of category throughout my 20 plus year career. But I've always had a passion for cars and motorcycles, always been a bit of a gearhead. And it started as an adolescent. My stepfather had two brothers that were really into cars. One in particular who built a lot of hot rods, 166 Nova that's just ingrained in my memory as a child. I was absolutely obsessed with this cherry red 66 Nova. He would build these cars from the ground up. And it all kind of stemmed from these, special moments that I spent with my stepfather. My biological father really wasn't in the picture at that time. And, I really identified, car culture as, being uniquely like masculine, that this is the kind of stuff that guys like. And it resonated with me from a very early age, and there's just something about the history and nostalgia of vintage motoring that speaks to my soul. And it's been a passion bordering on an obsession ever since.
Wow. You're giving me chills, Jesse, because I can relate. And I think real car guys, automotive enthusiasts, car girls, they can relate. You bring up an interesting point. Roots run deep in this hobby. It's not just about the cars. We have a connection. It becomes sort of a lifestyle. It's got roots, as you mentioned, with your stepdad and all those memories. I think when you say passion, we as automotive enthusiasts, we don't use those terms lightly. The brand loyalty. And it's clear to me, getting to know you a little bit, Jesse, and we're going to get into this, Jesse's got some ties to Chevelle. You've got an issue with Chevelles, don't you?
It's always been my favorite classic Chevy. Always been a Chevy guy. It's funny. I started this restoration business out in Austin, and our first build is a 1970 Bronco. Absolutely love Ford trucks. Don't have anything negative to say about Ford trucks. But when it comes to 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s vintage cars, I'm a Chevy guy all the way.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense based on what I'm seeing here. But having said that, there's more to the story. I want to kind of get your reaction to a couple things I'm going to put up here, Jess. A lot of my listeners and fellow gearheads, we've got a thing for Porsches as well. Number one, we got to find out the story behind this car, Jesse. Number two, what's the dog's name? Number three, I want to put you on the spot. Is Porsche the greatest sports car of all time? What do you think?
I believe so. Yes. The history of the brand, the way these cars are built, the way they handle. I think Porsche provides the ultimate driving experience. I really do, and it was always a very aspirational brand for me growing up, as it was for many people. Having Porsche posters up on your walls as a teenager. And when I got the opportunity to purchase this 87 911 930 turbo, sitting on these white BBSs that I completely refurbished, I jumped at the opportunity, and I absolutely stole this car, and it's one of my prized possessions.
A couple things you said there really resonate with me, Jesse, and I say it all the time. For those who are like neophytes or who haven't driven a 911 from any generation, be careful because it will ruin you for other cars. And as you just said, that aspirational element of the 911, it was the same for me and for a lot of guys as we grew up. And it's just unbelievable, the loyalty. Once you drive and own a 911, you're probably hooked for life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it can ruin you in more ways than one, because this car was actually called the Widowmaker. So
right. So that's a real whale tail Widowmaker. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Let's keep going, Jess. I want to look at a couple of other things here. There's more to Jesse than just Chevelles and Porsches, though. I want to talk about this car because in getting to know you a bit, Jesse, this one jumped off the page for me. Couple things I want to get your reaction. One, this is a 360, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard good and bad about the ownership experience. In my view, when I look at the 360, the lines, it's one of the most beautiful Ferraris of all time. And maybe that's a controversial opinion. Talk to me about your relationship with this car and what's your ownership experience been?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. The lines on this car and the 430s, I think, are exquisite. They're beautiful, beautiful cars. I came to purchase this car from a longtime friend and my boxing trainer, who was moving on to more extravagant and expensive Ferraris, and he offered to sell me this car, and I jumped at the opportunity. It's got under 30,000 miles on it. It's gated. It's black on tan, which you may or may not be able to tell from the photo. And the driving experience of the 360 is exceptional, honestly. The sound, the feel. I really love everything about this car. The only drawback on 360s is that they tend to be a bit problematic. A lot of different options on the car tend to break. The parts have a tendency to wear out very quickly, specifically if you drive the car hard and aggressively on a regular basis. I often contemplated getting a vanity plate for this car that says Money Pit.
Well, you covered a lot of ground there. And one of the things you and I were chatting about earlier, and one of the things that I like about you, Jesse, you drive your cars. You are a gearhead. You're an enthusiast, but these are not garage queens, right?
No, they're not. I drive all these cars on the regular. I'll show up to a meeting and people will ask me, "Oh, well, what's your daily driver? Do you have a Mercedes or a Tesla?" And I say, no, I drive one of these cars on the daily. Whether it's my Porsche or my Chevelle, which doesn't have air conditioning, so I tend to drive that a little bit less in the middle of the summer, or the 360. I drive these cars on a regular basis. And I personally think that's the best way to treat these cars. You want to enjoy them, but you also they need to be driven. It's not good for the engines on these vehicles, especially Porsches, to sit.
Right. Absolutely. You bring up some great points. On the 360, couple things. You mentioned this one's a gated manual, which in the market, we know that they do command a premium with good reason. Not a lot of big fans of those F1 automated manuals, just depending on who you talk to. What's Jesse's point of view on, the advent of the dual clutch transmission, which you get just so much high performance, incredibly fast shifts? Are you gravitating more towards those, or you say, CJ, I got to have my 3 pedals?
Oh yeah. Look, I'm an old school analog traditional guy. When it comes to the vehicles that I enjoy driving. So yeah, I'm a 3 pedal guy. There's actually a guy out there on Instagram called 3 Pedal Collector who I love to
Right.
follow. Got some great content. But yeah, the dual clutch is just not my thing. But obviously, there's a lot of performance and a lot of power there.
Absolutely. I want to keep moving because God knows we're having a good time, guys. Keep those comments coming. We're having fun tonight, as we always do, with the one and only Jesse Metcalf. Are you kidding me? So thrilled to have you here. Jesse is not just a Chevelle guy, a muscle car guy. He's not just an exotic car guy. Look at this rig. We're talking about some old iron. Talk to me about this truck and your relationship to it.
Okay, well, I bought this truck at a Mecum auction. It's a 71 GMC Sierra Grande, which are pretty rare. There's not a whole lot of these trucks out there in the marketplace in great condition. This truck is a lot of fun. My obsession with, well, I had a 54 Chevy 5 window pickup way back when. That was my first foray into vintage trucks. But I love the 70s pickups. I'm just absolutely obsessed with them. And this thing's 4-wheel drive, houndstooth interior, 3 on the tree. It's a really great ride.
What's absolutely incredible, and you mentioned you picked this one up through Mecum. If we could go back in time, Jesse, right? And we can't, but it's kind of fun to think about. It's kind of crazy. To your point, not a lot of these survived, and the ones that survived are pretty much dogged and ragged out so much. And we're going to talk about your new restoration shop, Remuda Motoring, in just a moment. But how many of these trucks just ended up in the junkyard as scrap, and now they are so desirable to guys like us and to the even the next generation. Like, these trucks are hot right now.
The vintage pickup truck market exploded. It's insane, the prices that these trucks are commanding. It's unbelievable. It really is
Wild, absolutely wild. Jess, let's keep going. A couple things. So I want to ask you 2 questions here as we take a look at more of kind of Jesse's rides, which I think is really cool. All right. Look at this guy, folks. Look at this shot. This, to me, Jesse, you tell me if I got this right. This looks like Los Angeles. This looks like Beverly Hills. This is a different 911. I want to talk to you, number one, about this car. And Jesse, let's talk about the automotive culture in Los Angeles. It's alive and well, I think. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of money here. And people are definitely plugged into the automotive trends here. There's a lot of enthusiasts. There's a lot of supercars on the street. There's a lot of vintage cars on the street. The Porsche, the Porsche, I don't want to call it an epidemic, but I mean, it's like, people are obsessed with Porsches right now. I mean, they're just, they're commanding huge dollars, and you can see it on the streets here. I live in Beverly Hills, actually, and you can see it on the streets of Beverly Hills. I mean, you got, trust fund kids, pushing 964s, I mean, it's just like where, it's because there's so much money here that people have the ability and to access these vehicles that, to the average person are just, I mean, they're untouchable. So yeah, you really get an interesting perspective on what's hot and car culture here in California, and obviously the climate is very conducive to having an expensive car collection, as opposed to being on the East Coast where you have to contend with the elements if you don't have a garage that can house 20 vehicles. So it's a fun place to have some cool rides because you get a lot of attention. That's for sure.
Right. A couple things, and I want to get your opinion on this, Jess. Out in Los Angeles, I believe, to your point, the weather, there's resources out there. The Porsche culture alive and well. You can almost throw a rock and hit a Porsche like anywhere you go. When I've been out there for business trips, so on and so forth, it's like, hey, there's another Porsche. Hey, there's a Ferrari. There's an Aston Martin. And just even retro stuff. Look at that cool Beetle from the 60s. Like, you see it all. And it's kind of refreshing as a car guy to see that it's still alive and well. What's the state? I want to get your opinion on this, Jesse. What's the current state of our hobby as car guys? What's the future? Because it's my perception, please let me know if you agree, that the millennials are one thing, but Gen Z, does Gen Z really have the passion that we have? What are your thoughts?
It's hard to generalize an entire generation. Obviously, you tend to age yourself when you do so. You kind of sound like your father, sort of talking down to you and your friends. I mean, it's just like. But I do feel that, and I mentioned this previously, that the analog culture, the vintage culture seems to be dying. Maybe with the Gen Xers or possibly the millennials, because the Gen Zs, they don't seem to have the same passion. They don't seem to have the same interest. Obviously, everyone wants to flex with a brightly colored supercar, but everything just seems a little bit more disposable. And I think the way state and federal governments are pushing EVs, the future of our hobby is definitely precarious, to say the least. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to drive values through the roof. I don't know if the bottom is going to fall out of the marketplace. I don't know what the future holds. I just know that I'm going to enjoy what I like and what I'm passionate about while I'm lucky enough to be on this planet.
100%. Oh, I'm with you on that, Jess. Now, I want to get back to another point here about before we get into talking a bit about Remuda, so on and so forth. But I want to take a look at this shot again because Jesse's into four wheels and a cage in cars and trucks, but you're also a two-wheeler guy. I see you've got a Duck there, a Ducati. Talk to us about your love and kind of what you do around motorcycles.
Well, I'll be honest with you. The first time I ever got on a motorcycle, I got on my stepfather's 600cc dirt bike and completely lost control and shot it into the woods and crashed.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, I was hooked ever since. I know that sounds insane. I'm fascinated by the culture. I don't by any means pretend, or presume to be a motorcycle aficionado. I didn't grow up riding from a very, very early age, but I like collecting. I've always liked collecting things. From when I was a child, and I think my experience with classic cars during my adolescence and my love of collecting old things, whether it was, sports cars or vintage swords or antiques or something, that something having a history, always fascinated me.
Mm,
And my first motorcycle was a Harley. I bought a Harley rocker on the set of a movie that I was doing in Shreveport, Louisiana. I just walked into the local Shreveport Harley dealership, pointed out a bike, bought it. At the wrap of that movie, I ended up riding that bike from Shreveport, Louisiana to Miami, Florida by
wow.
myself. Amazing experience. But once I discovered, street bikes, I just became obsessed with all these unique liveries, that, decorate these bikes. I made a connection with a place called Iconic Motors, here in Santa Monica, California, and they were auctioning some very pristine and collectible early '90s street bikes, and I ended up picking up sort of the holy trinity of '90s street bikes. I bought a '91 0001 Yamaha Genesis, super low miles. I bought a 91 Ninja, and then I bought a
Mm,
1990 RC30 Honda. And I don't I have ridden those bikes, but I don't generally ride those bikes.
right.
But I love those bikes. And in this picture here is a 2006 Ducati Paul Smart. And I actually ride this bike a lot.
No kidding.
most people have this bike sitting in their living room.
Wow.
uh,
Yeah, I've never
a
ridden a
great
Ducati, but
Yeah, I mean that. Everyone. I love the sound of this bike. I love the dry clutch. I love everything about this bike, and it gets a lot of looks. It gets a lot of attention.
I bet. Jesse, this is fantastic. Want to pivot a bit, and I want to talk about, now that we've kind of, guys, I got to be honest with you, it's kind of refreshing and fun to get to know a guy like Jesse and to realize that he's one of us. He's a real gearhead, and that's what we're all about on this channel. Jesse, now that I think you've kind of credentialized yourself, perhaps talking to us about your history as a car guy and what got you into the hobby and some of the cool rides, 4 wheels and 2 wheels you're involved with. Talk to us about your journey with Remuda Motoring and Lone Star Redemption, because it's just an incredible story. What are you up to these days?
Wow, CJ, I'm glad you asked about this because this is something I'm super, super excited about. I got together with three other gearheads that I was friends with, and we had a vision and we went for it. We all had a common love and passion for vintage motoring. And so we decided to start a restoration business in Austin, Texas, which at the moment pretty much centers on this first build that we've done. We've built this exceptional 1970 Bronco, but we've also built a couple Jeeps, and we've done some work on some pickups. So right now it's centering on Broncos, Jeeps, and pickups. And I'm shooting a reality show around the garage, that I'm out there pitching in the marketplace. I'm super excited about it. It's getting a lot of traction, and hopefully it'll land somewhere. Some maybe Discovery or Roku, and if not on one of these streamers, we're gonna take it to YouTube.
Oh, fantastic. Couple questions on that, because that's a pivot. It sounds like, Jesse, after this storied career, and at this phase in your career in Hollywood, pivoting a bit and focusing on automotive and classic car restoration. And you've assembled some interesting characters there. Talk to me about the learning curve and just Jesse Metcalfe as car guy and Hollywood actor parachuting into a very different world. What's that been like?
Well, I don't know if any of your viewers can relate, but COVID, this black swan event, sort of shifted my perspective a lot. So out here in Hollywood, we had COVID, then we had a writer's strike, and then we had an actor's strike, and it really threw a wrench in the industry, so to speak. And
Mm,
I decided I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something. One, I wanted to create, something for myself, but I kind of wanted to step away from the business a little bit. I was becoming just like a little disillusioned. And I wanted to, I come from a very blue collar background. And I thought that this would be an exciting venture, to be building things, and to also help my friends build something, build a brand, build a business. So really, the ethos of our brand and our business is reviving these classics. The show is tentatively titled Lone Star Redemption. It takes place in Texas, and in Austin, Texas specifically. And Austin is very much a character in the show. But the show is really about redemption. I mean, it's about making our dreams come true. It's about making our clients' dreams come true. I mean, because reviving these cars is almost like reviving their dreams, and because we all
right.
have dreams when we're young, and most of them don't come true. I mean,
Right.
we keep aspiring, but there's something about bringing a car that's very meaningful and significant to someone's life back to life, that I think makes for great television, and that's really what this show's all about. And
Absolutely. And oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jess.
I don't know. I mean, and Remuda specifically, we're trying to do it a little different with our builds. Instead of completely modernizing, these Broncos and these trucks, like many other shops do and do very well. We really feel like in a lot of ways, you lose the soul of the vehicle, by dropping the Coyote engines and making everything an automatic, and
Right.
completely kind of sucking the soul out of the interior and just making it just too new.
Absolutely.
We really want to preserve you know, the original feel of the vehicle
Yeah.
while improving it, with various, bespoke custom upgrades, and not lose, the essence of what the vehicle really was originally.
Absolutely. And to your point, I want to get into this vehicle, which is Remuda Motoring's initial project. I want you to talk about it, but just one comment on what you just shared, Jesse. That's been my observation as well. I share some of those same feelings. And candidly, looking at the market overall, I know I'm generalizing, but it seems like the cars that are restored with what I'll call incremental upgrades, going from, you know, manual brakes or, drum brakes to more modern disc brakes, electronic fuel injection, these incremental upgrades versus a full-on resto mod that takes away all of the historical character from the car, the better move is let's bring this car back to factory spec and a little bit better, and preserve that classic essence. What do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what Remuda Motoring is all about. And that's what this particular build is all about. So this is a rendering. This is the one sheet of the vehicle. I've shared some photos and some videos with you that, hopefully we can add to our conversation. What's great about this truck is that it's a manual. We didn't turn it into an automatic. Now, about 10 years after this original 1970 Bronco was purchased, okay, they dropped a 351 Windsor motor into this thing. We kept
Mm,
that motor, completely rebuilt it, upgraded it in multiple different ways. We put a hydraulic roller kit on it. We did aluminum heads from AFR. We did an Edelbrock multi-port fuel injection kit. This motor is probably pushing like 400 horse, but it's going to give you a much better feel than dropping a Coyote motor into this thing. Now, what you can tell from that photo right there is that a lot of the accessories on this motor and what makes this car, I think, very special aesthetically, is that we Cerakoted a lot of the parts on the engine and also a lot of the details on the interior and exterior of the car. If people don't know what Cerakoting is, it's this process where you bake on this very durable coating that almost looks like a matte metallic finish. So we painted this truck in Wimbledon white. And as you can also see, we painted the entire engine bay. A lot of people just do kind of like a black coating on the engine bay that, doesn't look particularly special. This is very custom, very, very bespoke, very clean. I mean, when you pop this hood, it's show quality. We put a serpentine wheel kit on it, in order to power the AC. But I mean, also the original motor in these things had just like one like V-shaped belt, and it's not adequate for the amount of power that this particular truck is going to have. And obviously we did all the braking and suspension and sway bar upgrades you can imagine, so that it's as smooth of a ride as possible. The vehicle doesn't sway too much in corners. We put a 2.5-inch lift kit on it. The upgrades that work that make the vehicle better, I think, are like rocker steps that come down automatically when you open the door. We have a lot of different features on this thing that make this build really over the top and special. Specifically, we redesigned the entire interior dashboard of this truck. Even moved like the speedometer. You may or may not know, but in an original 70s Bronco, the speedo's on the left, and it's like obscured by the steering wheel. So we moved that. We moved that to the middle of the dash, and it looks incredible.
Okay, so the dashboard, we'll go into details on that now because obviously there's a lot of changes here. So this is an original dash that's been modified. The biggest change by far is the speedometer cluster has moved from originally over here on the left behind the steering wheel, you really couldn't see it, to the center. So aesthetically, it balances things. It's for a cleaner, more simpler, elegant design. Additionally, we've gone with a Dakota digital speedometer unit. So there's actually a little LCD screen down here in the bottom. It's a black screen here that's going to display all the relevant information for the vehicle: speed, outside air temperature, compass direction, engine information, miles to empty, odometer, all of that shows up there. That's powered by all of these boxes that are down here on the floor. So all of that wiring is how everything in the vehicle talks together, and it shows up through this one clean display here. And it's got a classic Ford horn ring. And we're also going to wrap the exterior of this in leather that matches the seats. So it'll be a little bit of a tri-tone, pulling all of the elements of the car into one piece here. Down below, you can see that we've Cerakoted the pedals to match as well. So there's silver bits on the pedals. And all of that's been cleaned up. So
the dash pad, we actually had a late dash pad for this vehicle, and it had like a crazy...
Yeah, there's a hump that comes out down here on the correct 1970 piece. This is actually an early 1966, and they just started reproducing these. So it's not the correct dash for the vehicle, but it's a much cleaner, better looking dash. This will be covered in leather to match the seats, so the color will be the same as everything else. But it's a smaller, less intrusive piece that we've opted for to put the dashboard up here. Obviously, you're familiar with the seats; these are custom.
Every button on the interior is Cerakoted. The horn ring on the steering wheel is Cerakoted. It's got saddle leather seats that, really pop against the Wimbledon white. I mean, I could go on and on about this
Right.
truck. I'm so ridiculously proud of it. Obviously, if you have some knowledge of the Bronco market, I mean, these trucks range from $80,000 to $250,000. And I think
It's incredible. Yeah.
if you are not savvy as a buyer, okay, and you don't really know what to look for on the checklist of upgrades on these Broncos, you could get something that really isn't very restored. Just because something has a nice coat of paint on it doesn't mean it's worth 200 grand.
Right.
And I think that's I don't think the bubble has burst just yet in the Bronco market, but it has gotten pretty absurd, the prices that some of these trucks are pulling. And if you're going to spend that kind of money, you want to get a really, really quality build, an exceptional build. And this is that.
Right. And it's evident to me that you guys are doing it right here. And it's kind of been interesting, specifically with the Broncos, Jesse. They had a tremendous following, and it was kind of Bronco mania, vintage Bronco mania. And then when Ford brought back the new Bronco during COVID, it just throttled up, no pun intended, through the roof. And everything that you're saying, and as the price tag and the value of these vehicles goes up, whether it's a Mecum auction or just in that market in general, so does the scrutiny. To your point, Jesse, folks can make mistakes trying to restore these, or they go too far with a resto mod. You can ruin these if not done correctly. Do you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the guys, my friends, Cole Ziegler and Andy Ellis, are two master mechanics at Remuda Motoring. One thing they have in spades is taste. And this truck is so tastefully done. Cole, our master mechanic, he's just a wealth of knowledge. There's nothing he doesn't know. And there's no upgrade that hasn't been made on this thing that doesn't make this a better vehicle, but at the same time doesn't take away from the spirit of what the Bronco is really all about.
I'm excited for the unveiling, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. You mentioned this cast of characters. I want to play a brief clip showing everybody out there a little bit about Lone Star Redemption and what goes on at Remuda Motoring, and just this cast of characters, whether it's Cole, it's Andy, it's Emmy, or Ian, yourself, Jesse. There's some interesting dynamics. So let's take a look at this clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
All right, sounds good. I've always had a passion for motorcycles as well as classic cars. I had a stepfather who had a passion for motorcycles and cars. My passion and interest in vintage cars and restoration kind of grew from that. This whole journey started with meeting Andy.
I'm like the lubricant and the glue that binds everyone together.
He's a self-taught mechanic, started doing some mobile mechanic work, met our master mechanic, Cole. They started talking about possibly starting a restoration business. We acquired this early Bronco from Washington State, where it had been sitting outside for years. This forgotten and very neglected classic will be Remuda's first restoration.
Oh, look at that Bondo on there. They just filled it in. What is this? Oh,
Is that coolant?
you guys see what I see?
That's definitely coolant coming out the engine.
That's a hairline crack. The crack in the engine block was something that none of us could have predicted, even if we were tearing that thing apart before we bought it. You want the bad news or the worst news, man? This hole should not be here. Get in here close. See that right there?
Cracked engine block.
Crack block. And my guess is, there's a really bad freeze. I bet that there was water in this block with no coolant, and it expanded and it just cracked.
You serious?
This motor's donezo's.
I'm pissed. I'm honestly, I'm losing my mind, man. You know, because I just feel like this is a time suck. We're not going to get the money we want to get out of this truck. You know, I'm already into this business, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. I never wanted anything to do with this truck.
What do you want to do? I mean, we can't send this thing out with a crack block and rusted rockers, but
I'm going to take a walk.
I get it. His money's on the line. He's upset. He's worried about it, but that's not on me, and it's not cool. And I just wonder sometimes, like, is he cut out for this?
Mishaps keep happening, someone is going to get fired.
The stakes are high. So for me, you know, and for this group of guys, I mean, it's about taking hold of our own lives, and you know, just like we're restoring these cars, you know, each and every one of us, you know, we're looking for restoration ourselves. We're looking to restore our souls. Hey gang, let's huddle up, all right? Look, I know I've been a bit hard on you guys. Brought a peace offering.
Oh yeah.
All right? Some Lone Star, baby.
I appreciate Jesse coming back and saying, you know what, I'm sorry, let's bring it in.
Here's to Remuda. New venture for all of us. And restoring some great cars. I believe in you guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow. I got to tell you, some reactions, and I want to hear from you, Jesse. I can relate. This whole concept of working on cars and trucks over the years, the unforeseen is the unforeseen, the challenges, but then also the personalities. There's a lot at stake, a new business, you know, the dynamics, the stress, the pressure, but then kind of making it right and doing what's right for the team and the business. There's a lot in that little 90-second clip. Tell me about it, Jesse.
Well, starting a small business is not easy. I mean, I think there's some ridiculous statistic that, you know, 90% of small businesses fail. So in the startup stage, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of expense. You know, when we shot this, we had really just started the business, you know, uncovering all of the different bugaboos on this, you know, 1970 Bronco that had just been sitting out in the elements for the last 10 years of its life. The thing was completely rusted out. We had to get an entirely new tub for this truck. Cracked engine block. There was many unforeseen issues with this restoration. You know, and in that particular clip, I was complaining about having invested you know, X amount of dollars, you know, now I've invested 10 times that. So, you know, and we're just finishing our very first build. So this is certainly a big risk for all of us. It's definitely a labor of love. And we've been through a lot, you know, building this business and this brand. You know, there's been many arguments, but I think it's going to make for great television. You know, because at the end of the day, we're all committed to the same goal. We all really respect each other, our perspectives, our talents, our strengths as a team, and I think we're going to make this thing fly. And this you know, our inaugural build is going to be really the calling card for us. I think people are going to see the quality and the time and energy that's gone into this build. It's truly remarkable. It's meticulous.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the team. Guys, Remuda Motoring on Instagram. Check it out. You can see more. Now, Jesse, just a couple of things by way of follow-up. Talk to us, you know, just, you know, I had to take a look at this shot and I wanted to ask you about it because this looks like a shot of your shop. And what's the story with this poor old Jeep? Or is that, you know, what's going on with this Jeep?
Okay, well, I sent you that Jeep Renegade, okay, because Jeeps are getting really hot. and we are going to do a really special restoration on this. We're going to preserve that patina.
Cool.
You know, we'll probably color match that door, but we're going to completely rebuild this truck from the ground up. But we're going to keep that patina on that Jeep, and we're going to clear coat it, make it pop more. It's going to be a really special project. So that's next up after the Bronco.
Totally awesome. Yeah, I mean, listen, Jeep mania. You got two different types of people in the world: Jeep people and Bronco people, maybe. No, but in all seriousness, this is going to be an interesting build to watch as well. Quick question, coming back to the Bronco, Jesse, is the Bronco available? I want to talk about the unveiling. Kind of what's next for that Bronco?
Well, if I don't buy it, yeah, it's available.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, we haven't really been advertising the truck too much. Like I said, we really want to use it as the calling card for Remuda. We're going to do this unveiling on July 3rd in Austin, Texas, at the Petrol Lounge. It's going to be the first time people are going to be able to see the truck in person. But yeah, you know, if you're in the market for an A+ Bronco build, and you're into you know, Wimbledon white. I mean, me personally, I absolutely love white vintage cars and trucks. I don't know. There's something about white that does it for me. But this build's really over the top. You know, whoever buys this truck is going to be incredibly happy and is going to be making an investment that, you know, they'll be able to see back. You know, they're not gonna get a product and find out that it has all kinds of problems with it. I mean, this thing has been meticulously built from the ground up and rigorously documented, and it comes with a book with all the documentation of the build. It's really going to be exceptional. So if there's interest, always reach out on the Remuda Motoring Instagram.
Absolutely. And Jesse, first things first, I want to thank you once again for coming on the podcast, for kind of sitting on the hot seat today. Listen, some exciting things coming. Remuda Motoring, we've got Lone Star Redemption. Jesse, what's the best way for my listeners and for all of us to stay abreast of what's going on, to get the updates, the next steps as this thing continues to evolve? Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, please follow us on Instagram. It's Remuda Motoring, like Bermuda, but with an R. And please, you know, follow me on Instagram. I'm Real Jesse Metcalf. Same thing on TikTok, Real Jesse Metcalf. And I post a lot of content from the garage on there, and you can stay up to speed on everything I'm doing.
Absolutely awesome. Guys, Jesse Metcalf, thank you so much. Gearheads out there, I think you guys would agree. Not only is he just an incredible guy with an amazing story and this awesome Hollywood career, but he's one of us. He's a gearhead, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. He's jumping into the industry with some really cool stuff, doing these restorations, Remuda Motoring. Listen, Lone Star Redemption. I'm excited. I'm here for it. Jesse, thank you so much. Can't wait to see what's next. Can't wait for the unveiling event, July 3rd. And thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, CJ. I appreciate you so much. And I'll see you in Austin, July 3rd.
Looking forward to it. Guys,
Cool.
We're going to wrap it up. And until we see you on the next one, take care of yourself. Peace.